reading Nook. I am your bookslinger. I work in a bookstore. I read a lot of books, and I buy a lot of them mainly due to staff discount. However, working in a bookstore also means I am exposed to a lot of different genres of books, some which I may necessarily not have ventured into otherwise. And there will be one or two on this list of August. So let's get started. The first book I read this month was Troy, or Lord of the Silver Bow, which is part 1 of the Troy trilogy by David Gamel, and this was recommended to me by my very good friend Minimancer, or the Minimancer. This is not necessarily a retelling of the events leading up to the Trojan War, but rather it focuses on 3 different characters that are named, but there are multiple perspectives. The ones we are introduced to at first is Helicon, or I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce it, Prince of Dardania, which was a neighboring region to ancient Troy. So he is allied to Troy, but he's not Trojan himself. And the book opens up with him about to sail his massive ship back home, back to Troy, carrying some passengers. One of these passengers is Argurios, who is a warrior of Mycenae, or Mycenae, not sure, who was the king of the Mycenae was the kingdom of Agamemnon, a name that most people are familiar with. Argurius, however, is on shaky ground with his homeland due to some events, and he is not exactly thrilled to be sailing with Helicon, given he killed one of the most prominent Mycenaean soldiers. And thirdly, we have Andromache, formerly a priestess that lived on the island of Phera. However, where she was a priestess to a cult that believed they were hindering the Minotaur that they believed was was imprisoned under the island from breaking through. However, once her sister, who was scheduled to be married to Hector of Troy, when she passes away unexpectedly, Andromache is recalled from her exile and sent to Troy in order to become Hector's wife and quite likely future queen. So this story, it takes place, a lot of it takes place on the sea or on the coast, which they call the Great Green. There is some debate as to why they did that. The story itself is grounded in the ancient myths. However, Gamel puts his own spin on things, and when I talked to the Minimaster about this, she said this is a sort of retelling before the mythological elements entered the narrative. There was lots of perspectives in this book, lots of characters, but it never felt dull or tedious. It does not shy away from violence or brutality, but portrays them as that was how life was in that era. Life was cheap, and blood was a very frequently used currency. Now, I don't want to say too much about the actual plot of the book. Mostly because it has a few surprises, and I just recommend it, and I want people to read it, so I don't want to spoil it for them. Before we move on, one last thing. Odysseus is here, and it's quite an interesting portrayal of him, especially since I last saw him in Circe. So yeah. No, I definitely recommend Lord of the Silver Bow. I'll pause here for a few, if there's any questions. Right, then we shall move on to Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. The second book I've read by her, the first one was Sharp Objects. I like this one better. However, my feelings on it are complicated. It follows the main character, who is Libby Day, the lone survivor of a family massacre in which her mother and her two sisters died in one single night over 20 years ago. And she and the other main character is Ben, or Benjamin Day, who is the one doing time for this crime. Chiefly due to the testimony Libby gave during the trial, despite her being a literal child at the time. In the present day, Libby gets contacted by a group of true crime enthusiasts, and they believe in Ben's innocence. And through some cajoling and monetary incentive, because she is broke, she gets roped into, well, seeing if there's any truth to these claims. That whether Ben was actually innocent and she put him there for over 20 years. The narrative itself shifts between the past and present. In the present, we follow Libby exclusively. In the past, it jumps between the mother, Patty Day, and Ben himself. And it all takes place during a single day in the past, in which a lot of things happen. We get a lot of things explained to us, though I do believe that Flynn does a very admirable job in showing, not telling. There is a lot of there's a lot of events that takes place the day of the massacre that it doesn't feel like you're being beaten over the head with it. Now, this book, it's firmly rooted in an event I am fascinated by, or a period of time rather, in the 80s in the States, called the Satanic Panic. And this is brought up a lot of times in the book. And if one knows anything about the Satanic Panic, it was connected a lot to allegations of child abuse in schools, preschools, that kind of thing. And we Libby is a example of how those kind of allegations came forth and how they ruined lives, because several people did jail time for allegations that were brought by children, their students or their wards, and the allegations were completely false. They were logically impossible, and the children had simply been, well, coached to tell a story, but the story was not in their own words. It was simply fed to them piece by piece by the psychiatrists and the police. And it's a very interesting point in history to focus in on. And yeah, dark topics. Very dark topics. And about a third of the way into the book, I could not say I had read any more disturbing piece of fiction that was not just like supernatural or horror stuff. And I had to force myself past certain points. However, I pushed through and I was rewarded. The last third went really quickly, still disturbing, but I was engrossed, and I'm glad I pushed through. I will, however, say I never want to be in a head like Ben's ever again. And just be forewarned, the book does not pull punches. It is excessively blunt in some aspects and tastefully not hesitant, but drawn back in others. And yeah, I recommend it with the caveat, know what you're getting into. I didn't. And yeah, that's Dark Places. Next up, Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. The sequel to Vicious, the second book in the Villains duology, which apparently is set to become a trilogy. So, I like this better than Vicious, first of all. I gave Vicious a 4-star, I give Vengeful a 5-star. And it's very difficult to talk about this book without spoiling things. Spoiling the first book. So, I'm just gonna talk about 2 characters that are added to the gallery without mentioning the others in the first book. So, the first character we are introduced to in this second installment is Marcella Riggins, the wife of a mafia enforcer. And during a dinner time argument with her husband, she ends up, well, left for dead. However, if one is familiar with Vicious, one knows death is not necessarily the end, especially if it's a near-death experience. So, Marcella wakes up in the hospital, and she has a new power. if she touches something and she utilizes this power, she can ruin anything. This includes organic tissue, this includes non-organic matter. One of the first things she does is grip the sheets or the covers she is lying under, and they start molting or molding. So we are then taken along on a vendetta, and Marcella is absolutely ruthless. She is bad, she knows it, and she loves it. So she is driven, ambitious, and not a little bit scary. The second character is June, a shapeshifter. She has a very unknown past, and she attaches to Sydney, who we met in the first book. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, the second book takes place 5 years after the first one. My bad. And I can't say anything else without spoiling Vicious, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just gonna say, great book. You need to have read Vicious first. Otherwise, you're gonna be entirely lost. I'll take a break to rehydrate. And we'll take any questions if there are. Right. Oh, yes, of course. I don't remember the name of the dog now. Damn it, I should have written that down. Oh well. Next, we come to The Dive. Now, some disclosure. I met this author. She was in the store for the release party. It's her first novel. I talked with her. The copy is signed. However, I feel I can still be at least mainly impartial. So, this book takes place on an island in Thailand, and we follow two characters. Cass, who is a scuba instructor that has settled down on this island along with several other permanents, as they are called, like a Scotsman named Logan, who is a bartender, and her fiance. And then we also have Greta, who is a Swedish yoga teacher, or well, a yogi. And yeah, I found that funny for the Swedish for there to be a Swedish character. Anyway, that's Cass. Our second character is Brooke, who is an influencer on the island, and we're not quite sure of her motives, but we are led to believe that she has some trouble in her past. So, the book opens up with, well, the prologue is actually a woman getting murdered. She gets drowned. And we are in her head when this happens, and one of the last things she thinks is, I trusted the wrong person. So immediately we understand, okay, whoever killed this woman is on the island. and that makes for a very tense atmosphere. I think it made for a good thriller. I wouldn't exactly call it a mystery, because there are some aspects of it, but the pacing, the moments of tension, and just the flow, which is just another word for pacing, but whatever. It made for a good thriller. And yeah, it had several twists that caught me off guard. Good descriptions of the island. It was easy to tell that the author herself had been inspired by an island she visited in the past. Dialogue was good. I liked the characterization. I recommend it. I didn't love it. I really liked it. But yeah, 4 out of 5 stars is really damn good. Any questions? Alright. Then we shall move on. Okay. The Shadows of What Was Lost by James Islington. This was recommended to me by an old friend that I've known for over 10 years back in my old town. And according to him, anyone that has liked Brandon Sanderson and his writing has loved this. Now, I have only read 1.5 Brandon Sanderson's book. I listened to half of The Way of Kings, and I read Steelheart. And yeah, I'm not the best judge, given I am not that familiar with Sanderson. However, first the positives. Shadow of What Was Lost was definitely ambitious. It's a big world that he has created. The narrative is very sprawling. We jump between different perspectives a fair bit. The main character, Davian, is special. He is training in an academy where people called gifted are taught how to utilize their powers. However, due to some events, he is forced to flee, joined by his best friend. And as it happens, the group grows as they make this journey. And yeah, it draws on a fair bit of like traditional elements in an epic fantasy. There are some aspects that I thought was kind of fresh, which was nice. However, one of the big flaws of this book is one I was told about by the Minimancer, and I agree with her. And that is the lack of consequences for the characters. This book is not squeamish with gore. There is a lot of descriptions of bodies mutilated and everything, every which way. However, the characters may have a freak out or such in the moment, but then it never gets brought up again. They are not scarred, they are not traumatized, despite the fact that they are all like 16. Seeing such horrific stuff will affect you mentally. Yet, these kids seem just fine, which does not feel realistic. Other than that, it was a bit dull in parts, pacing was off sometimes. It was inconsistent, certain perspectives were written better than others in my opinion. I was not in love with the magic system, and it drew on several different kind of elements. To me, it felt very, well, inspired by Christianity, and like, I'm not gonna get political or religious here, but I just didn't jive with it. Now, I respect the craftsmanship of putting out this book, which is over 600 pages long. I could not write this. Good lord, no. However, as a reader, I have read way better epic fantasies. So, I am torn right now on if I'm going to continue and see this trilogy through. It's not high on my priority list. Yeah, but I'm stubborn. I try very hard to not DNF, do not finish a book. Mostly because I read quickly, so it's not a massive time investment for me. But yeah, this took a long time to get through, mostly because I just was never that gripped by the story. Anyway, that's enough spent on that. Oh boy, okay. So, this has been, I believe, only the second non-fiction book I have read this year. And okay, it's a short one. It's only like 150 pages. So, in English, this book is called The Consent. In French, I believe it is La Consent. And it is the biography of a woman named Vanessa Springora, who, as a preteen, was groomed and abused by a very, well, influential and famous French author in the 80s, 90s, I think, something like that, maybe 70s. And yeah, this is her way of telling her story, which begins when she's just like 5 or 6, and then we get to see a little bit of her growing up, and then she meets this man named as G in the book. It's very easy to to discover who he actually is, because this made for a huge scandal. And rightly so. She was manipulated, groomed, abused, assaulted repeatedly over the course of 4 or 5 years, I believe, until she essentially got too old for him, which I believe was when she was like 15 or 16, which is just a gross sentence to say out loud. But yeah, this is a first-hand account of a predator. The predator that manipulated her, who made her believe he was her beloved, that what they were doing was not wrong, which it obviously was. It was a massive crime. And it was also very insightful in showing the narcissism of someone who believes they are above law, morals, who just, in their own view, can't be wrong. Which was frankly terrifying. So, am I happy I read this book? No. Am I enlightened for having read this book? Yes. Was it worth it? Yes. Was it harsh and rough and brutal? Yes, yes, and yes. It's far from for everyone. However, I believe it is an incredibly important story to be told. And I have the utmost respect for Vanessa Springora for having written this and published it. Which must have been full of trials and travails. So, yeah, that was an interesting afternoon and morning when I read this. Alright, let's get back to something more whimsical. The Ashes of London. So, this is the first in a series of historical mysteries that I picked up after having been sucked into the Shardlake series by C.J. Sansom. However, both authors I have read now in the genre that were not C.J. Sansom, which was Bishop, which I read City of Vengeance, and now Andrew Taylor with Ashes of London. I wonder, maybe Sansom just struck gold and these guys struck out. For me. So, this book, it's a historical murder mystery. It's set during the Great Fire of London and just after, in the year 1666, when almost the entirety of London burned down. Mostly because it was built of wood in those days. So, the story opens up with a murdered man being discovered in the Church of St. Paul's. However, he was killed before the fire, and he was found with his thumbs tied behind his back. And yeah, that's the starting shot for the story. So we are introduced to two different people. James Marwood, who is employed under in the service of a barrister, I believe, and he's the son of a traitor. A traitor that was a follower of a line of thought that was called I believe it was called the Fourth Kingdoms or something like that. Essentially, they were a group of fanatics that believed that the British Empire was to be the fifth kingdom. I believe fourth or fifth kingdom. I don't exactly remember. This book did not leave too much of an impression on me. And they were the ones that led a revolt that had James the no Charles II's father got executed by these religious fanatics, in the belief that they were paving the way for the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, to return. So, with that little aside done, he is tasked with investigating this. Then we have Catherine, or Cat Lowett. She's a young woman, said we married off to an older man. However, the house she stays in, bad stuff happens, she escapes, and she is the daughter of another traitor, who was also instrumental in this overthrowing of the king that happened some years ago. Rambling aside, I found the narrative slow at times. It just felt a bit too cluttered. Pacing was off. I could really have used a better map, because the map that was barely legible. And given this took place in London with a lot of anchor points that you would only know if you were familiar with London. So, as someone who has never been, I was entirely lost. I did not feel the tension much in this book. And in the end, was alright. I am not sure I'm willing to commit to the 7 or 8 other books in the series, because it didn't grip me. It was a bit of a disappointment. Which bummed me out a bit. Alright. Next, a book I still haven't rated on Goodreads, because I'm not sure what to say about it. This is a science fiction book, which is first of all a genre I am not a massive fan of. It is disjointed, but not necessarily in bad writing, more like hard to follow. It jumps in time, there's time travel involved, multiple characters and multiple times, existential questions, a single unifying element that seems to tie these anomalies in time together. I read it. It went quickly. It was short. I feel either a lot of things went over my head, or I just need to actually discuss this book with someone. Because this was also a book of the month in science fiction a few months ago in the store. But I was not a part of that circle. So, I don't know. Maybe I could get out more of it, but at this point... I feel like I'm being needlessly cruel. Okay. Now we're getting into some good stuff. The Blade itself, by Job Abercrombie, the first book in the First Law trilogy. This was recommended to me by the Minimancer, once again. It's one of her all-time favorite trilogies. And even after only having read the first part, I can see why. So, this is a grim, dark fantasy book. There's very few good people, and even the good peoples have significant flaws. And we follow three main characters. Logan Ninefingers, a barbarian, who, as an aside, is the best depiction of a barbarian I have ever seen. His reactions when he's in civilization to all the trappings that we and the people would consider just normal is completely bewildering to him. Which was a lot of fun reading, honestly, because the book, while grim dark, it has a lot of dark and black comedy. Next we have Jesal Uthar, a nobleman and aspiring fencer who's training for the big fencing competition. This man, I absolutely despised him from the get-go, which is not surprising given the blurb on the back of the book describes him as the paragon of selfishness. However, despite that, I did eventually find some sympathy for him, which was frankly shocking. And now the third player in this little trio. Inquisitor Sandan Glokta. Military hero turned cripple, investigator and interrogator. Inquisitor and interrogator. This man was a military legend. Then he was captured in a war. He was in the Emperor's torture dungeon for 2 years. And when he was released, when the war was over, he was a broken man. However, he is a broken man with, well, pure tenacity to stay alive. And he attaches to tasks. Most of the comedy in this book comes from Glokta and his self-deprecating nature, just because he knows he is miserable. A lot of times people are like, oh, if you don't talk, we will make it worse for you. And he's like, how could you make it worse? Like, my leg is crippled. My mouth doesn't work because sequences of my teeth were filed down so I can only eat porridge. He has immense pain in his back and, well, everywhere, essentially. And yeah, he is a thoroughly miserable person and despicable. He's an interrogator, he's a torturer. However, he is led on the trail of some corruption in the government, and he takes to his job with dedication. And the only reason I don't hate him as much is because he's surrounded by worse people. Like, he's a bad man. At least he's doing bad things that seek to make things better for people. Glokta is a complicated man. Anyway, the story itself is brutal. hard to read at times with the depictions of violence, like the interrogations made me cringe. But I blazed through this book. It took me like 1.5 days, 2 maybe, to just pour through it. And I have already bought the next 2 parts in this series. And I am very eager to read them when they come up on my book pile. So yeah, Blade itself, as long as you have a strong stomach, highly recommended. Highly recommended. Let's go to an entirely different genre. Rachel's Holiday by Marian Keyes. Now, this is classified as chick lit. Never read anything like that before. This was recommended to me by my boss, and yeah, this one also flew by. It was quite a contrast going from Joe Abercrombie to this, but I just got sucked into the story here. So, the short of it. The book follows Rachel Walsh, a drug addict in New York City, who is forced into a rehab called the Cloister after nearly overdosing herself to the point of death. And she gets brought back to Ireland. She gets put into this rehab, which she believes would be just like a holiday, because she's not an addict. Like, oh no, all these other people? No, I'm just here because... I needed a break from New York anyway. So... Rachel is the unreliable narrator to the extreme, since she is in complete denial of her own addiction and reads all the reactions of people in the most flattering light to her. So, yeah, when she gets into this rehab and gradually comes to terms with the fact that she actually is an addict, that she behaved horribly to her friends and family, and more than anything, was a complete bitch to her boyfriend. So, this book, oh boy, it was hard to read at points. Simply because it portrayed the worst of humanity in different stages. Most of the people in the rehab are alcoholics. We actually get to be present for multiple therapy sessions in which the past of these characters are brought out. And I 100% believe that Marian Keyes either has personal knowledge of alcoholism and or drug abuse, or she has done a lot of research into it. This was harsh. It does not glorify drug use or alcoholism in the slightest. It portrays how, while Rachel was stoned or drunk or whatever, things to her were just dandy. But when she gets to hear what her behavior actually looked like from outside, it is harrowing. Most of the book, I was just dreading when they were gonna get to the therapy session where her boyfriend was gonna be there, her ex-boyfriend, and read from the questionnaire that had been sent to him in order to answer questions about his relationship with Rachel and her drug abuse and such. And good God, that was... no, that was not nice to read, but it doesn't happen until fairly late in the book. But I was just on the edge of my seat waiting for that to happen because, oh God, I've only seen it from her point of view, what's actually going on. Because the book jumps between present time, which is her in the cloister, and the past, which more specifically is the past year or so in New York, including her meeting her boyfriend, or who is at first just a casual lay, eventually becomes boyfriend. They are together for 6 months, and then rehab happens. The book got steamy at times. There were some scenes that I was like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. I wouldn't say it was straight smut, but it was definitely of an adult nature. Let's put it that way. The book itself went by very quickly. I loved it. I highly recommend it. I am most likely, or most definitely, going to pick up more Marion Keys down the road. Because this was so different from anything I read recently that it was a bit of a breath of fresh air and very, very human. And that was... It was just nice. Yeah. But yeah, no, highly recommended. Alright, now we're ready to move on. We only have 4 books to go. Alright. Death in a Strange Country by Donna Leon. This was recommended, well, this author was recommended to me by a customer. Unfortunately, I did not manage to get the first book. This is the second book in the series. The first book is called Death at La Fenice. And I bought the wrong one because I just saw Donna Leon, Death. I blame myself. So, this is a series of mysteries set in Venice, and where we follow a police detective, commissario, I believe. And yeah, it begins with the discovery of a body of of an American in one of the channels of Venice. And it looks like it might have been a bit more than just a mugging. So, this book takes place mainly in Venice, of course, and the American army base in Frenza, I think it was called. Whatever. and eventually maybe there are some connections to high-level military stuff. But I can't even muster much enthusiasm to talk about this book. Well, it's not exactly boring, but it just did not scratch the mystery itch I was looking for. Almost a bit plain. Which is unfortunate, but c'est la vie. Oh yes. Book 2 of The Faithful of the Fallen. Valor by John Gwynne. Now, I believe I gushed a fair bit over Malice, though I didn't rate this super high in my first 6 months review. However, I might retroactively raise it up because Valor... Oh yeah, hey other. Yeah, Valor. Whoo, boy and Nelly. So I'm not gonna be able to talk about much regarding this book, but I loved it. It picks up minutes, literal minutes after the ending of the first book. Characters have come together. We still have the main character Corbin, and he seems to be, well, poised for a destiny to be the bright star in the war over the Banished Lands against the Black Sun. It is like the prophecy, the chosen one. Those are very traditional tropes. Gwyn does something special with this. And the world he has created that is heavily inspired by Scottish Highlands and not a little bit Viking, I believe. Good lord, this flew by. It was also helped by the fact that the chapters are quite short. The book is 670 or so pages, and I believe there were 120 chapters. So I haven't done the math, but some chapters were literally just 2 pages, and every chapter break means a shift in perspective. And we jump along a lot of characters. And they are located all over the map of the Banished Lands. And yeah, when I finished this book, normally when you read a fantasy series, it's trilogies, or it's way further, like Wheel of Time. But this is a quadrology. I am only halfway through, and Gwyn has already grabbed my heart, squeezed it, and threatened to rip it out. And I love him for it. Valor, complete blast. Gwyn is excellent at writing action. The world he has created is fascinating. The map is very clearly laid out, and I went back to it multiple times. Also helps the fact that there is a index of characters before the first chapter even begins. So you can go back and like, oh, okay, I feel I recognize this name. You go back, ah, yes, that's him or her. But yeah, if I were to say one flaw, there are not that many female points of view that we get to follow. I believe there are 3. I might be missing 1 or 2, but for at least to me, I am a man, so I still found believable and well written. However, a female reader might find some more flaws. I can only speak from my own experience. And yeah, I'm I'm gonna be picking up Ruin pretty much when I feel it's justified, depending on how far I've gotten down my book pile. All right. Yeah, that was battle was hype for me. Loved it. Okay, second to last. The Wrecker's Curse by Joe Silva. This was the mystery/crime book of the month for the reading circle in the store. And it's a murder mystery set in Cornwall. Very heavy on the pirate themes. The main character, Belladonna, or Donna Nightshade, is from an old family line, the Nightshade family line, in which each like matriarch of a generation is given the name Belladonna Nightshade. So there has been like a 7 or 8 generation successive line of Donna Nightshades. So, and she is a florist turned investigator. Not exactly a common career jump. So, the first case she ever deals with is a man she is related to gets murdered, and a lot of the evidence points to her. So, our chief, or, well, I guess this is the point I introduce Joe Ennis, which is the young policeman who is... he and Donna used to be lovers, or at least besotted with each other in the past, before he put her in cuffs and sent her to jail. And things are tense, and his superior has to twist her arm in order to get 4 days to investigate this and not just bring Donna in as the culprit. Then these two are the perspectives we shift between. The Nightshade family was delightful. They were very quirky. I particularly liked the character Lamorna, who is Donna's little sister. You are correct, Loon. Yep. Belladonna, I believe it's just... I don't remember the full name, but Belladonna is part of the Latin name for Deadly Nightshade. But yeah, the character Lamorna, who is Donna's little sister, and she is on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. And I identified a lot with her. She takes things literally. She is very straightforward. Her way of thinking I felt very familiar with. And yeah, she says what's on her mind. And I just found that a very heartwarming portrayal of someone on the spectrum. My own diagnosis is mild, but I don't know, it just felt... I felt seen, in a way. And yeah, the book, it was fun. It was very funny at points. Tying together things nicely at the end. Had a lot of twists, many turns, and several reveals and confessions. Yeah. No, I recommend this book. It was fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Yep. And our final entry for August. A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. I cannot blame people who say this book is purely smut. To me, it's not purely smut, though there are definitely smutty parts. This is a retelling of the Hades and Persephone story, the myth, which is a story I love. Pretty much every depiction I have seen, like the game Hades, the webcomic Lore Olympus, I just love I love their dynamic, even though this one was a bit more intense. Yeah, this is quite similar to Lore Olympus in a way. It's the modern times with computers, newspapers, cars, all of that kind of stuff. Persephone makes a deal with Hades. And the deal, or the bet, is to grow things in the underworld. Which, and if she cannot succeed this in 6 months, she will be forced to permanently live in the underworld. Now, she is technically the goddess of spring, however her powers have not manifested, and any plant she touches instead withers, or wilts, or dies. Meaning, the bet she has made seems incredibly hopeless, and yeah, that's the stage setting for this story. In this, Hades runs a casino. Persephone is a journalist student and intern at a newspaper. And she also gets the idea to write an article about Hades, and things go on from there. But this is fantasy romance. It is definitely steamy. This is definitely R-rated. However, I still felt the story was fleshed out enough that it wasn't just window dressing for the erotic parts. And yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I'm likely to pick up more in this series. Yeah. No, I liked it. Was it uncomfortable to read in public? At points. So, yeah. That was the week of month of August for me. Bookslinger has been busy this month, the past month. We'll see if I reach these heights again for September. I kinda doubt it. But I do have several books on to be read pile next that I am very excited to get to. In particular, after I finish my current one, I am going to finally be delving into She Who Became the Sun, which I am stoked about. Now, any questions? I have a feeling I might suspect one of them. Yeah, He Who Drowned the World. I'm not gonna be able to pick it up for a while yet because it's still only in trade paperback, but the cover is amazing. I will definitely be picking up once we get a paperback version in the store. Because even if I haven't even read the first one, everyone I've talked to loved that book, so I have very little doubt I will love it as well. Now, as is customary, I suppose. Well, customary as far as anything can be customary when it's this new. If I were to give my ranking of the top 3 books I read the month of August, I think I would place Valor at the very top, followed by The Blade itself, and then Rachel's Holiday. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved Vengeful. However, I feel those 3 will stick in my head longer. Might not also be fair given The Blade itself is the first of a trilogy and Valor was the second in a quadrilogy. But we'll see. But yeah. Almost 1.5 hours. That's probably good enough. I will be editing the video in a few spots at least. Cut down on the dead air in the beginning. But yeah, I'm grateful for you being here, and I hope my thoughts have, well, I don't know, maybe sparked some interest in a book you had never heard of before, or just hearing my thoughts on a book that you already read and really enjoyed as well. It's the beauty of books. You can talk about them, you can share, and I am always open to get given recommendations as well as give recommendations. It is the best part of my job. And with that, the Reading Nook is closing for the month, and I will see you back when September ends.